Containment strategy is a foreign strategy implemented by the United States after the Second World War. It mainly refers to the United States using military encirclement, economic blockade, and political subversion as the main means to contain the development of socialist countries and the international communist movement and realize the United States. A series of strategic measures adopted for world hegemony. The containment strategy once had a major impact on world politics in the second half of the 20th century and greatly changed the global geopolitical ecology. As an important part of the U.S. world hegemony strategy system, the U.S. containment strategy has always been consistent, stable, continuous, and extensible, of which consistency is the essential feature. From peaceful evolution to color revolution to Twitter revolution, the essence of containment has never changed. 1. The consistency of the U.S. containment strategy system. 1. Consistency in strategic thinking. Peaceful evolution is a super-containment strategy adopted by Western forces in the mid to late 1950s when armed intervention was not feasible. It mainly affects the psychology of the people in the target country through technological exchanges, cultural exchanges, and ideological infiltration, cognition and behavior, and then affect the social lifestyle and state operation mode of the target country, thereby changing the social system of the target country quietly. The United States is the main body of Western forces implementing peaceful evolution against socialist countries. The United Kingdom, France, Australia, and Japan are political allies of the United States in implementing various containment strategies around the world. Color revolution refers to the regime change movement that started in the 1950s and lasted until today, which is named after color and carried out with nonviolent means and gimmicks around the world. In August 2020, when the new crown pneumonia epidemic was raging, the United States planned a color revolution in Belarus during the Belarusian presidential election. When Lukashenko met with the military after the election, he said that the United States is the leader and organizer of this color revolution, and Europe is the helper of the United States. In July 2021, a demonstration against the government took place in Cuba. Western media took the opportunity to publicize that the Communist Party has messed up the Cuban economy and pointed the finger at the Cuban Communist Party. Biden also made a televised speech, calling Cuba a failed country and declaring that communism was a failed system, thus sending a strong signal of a color revolution against Cuba. The reappearance of old tricks shows that the Biden administration is continuing to implement the color revolution. In terms of strategic thinking, both color revolutions and peaceful evolution are super-containment strategies adopted by Western forces against socialist countries, with the purpose of promoting the collapse of the socialist state system. Both use nonviolence as a means of implementation and gimmicks, and of course they sometimes use violent means. Both are implemented on the premise that armed intervention by Western forces is not feasible, and sometimes use force intimidation as a supporting means. The long-term subjects of the implementation are the United States as a global containment strategy led by the Western capitalist countries. Since the 21st century, some Western media and political forces have used Twitter and other new online media to incite political protests in target countries or regions. For example, Iran, Moldova, Tunisia, Egypt, etc., and even the riots in Hong Kong, China, all use the internet to instigate and induce those dissident youth who want to shape their own government to engage in regime subversion activities without leaving a trace. This so-called revolution with new media as the main medium is not only a new method of peaceful evolution, but also a new trick of color revolution, and even a new form of containment strategy. But no matter how the means and forms change, the essence of containment remains unchanged. 2. Consistency of strategic guidance. From the perspective of the strategic system, anti-communism is the core guiding ideology of the containment strategy, while de-ideologization is the guiding ideology and propaganda means of the containment strategy. From peaceful evolution to color revolution to Twitter revolution, they all claim to ban all political slogans on the surface, in order to help improve the lives of people in socialist countries, but in fact they all support the target countries with funds informal political organization, the implementation of Western parliamentary system and multi-party system. The purpose is anti-communism. In the process of the color revolution, the United States provided huge economic aid and cultural support to the so-called dissidents in the target countries, and strengthened the so-called cultural exchanges by establishing universities, setting up scholarships, exporting experts, and attracting foreign students. Cultivate revolutionary leaders. In terms of political means, the United States still uses the banner of advancing the democratization process to help the target countries implement so-called internal reforms and foster pro-Western regimes. In terms of tactics, The United States always takes advantage of the situation, taking advantage of internal difficulties or social crises in target countries and regions, to interfere in other countries' internal affairs, and to shift and escalate conflicts. In the process of containment, the differences in ideology seem to disappear, but the result is that the country experiencing the revolution has been westernized in terms of system and ideology. Of course, Western forces help improve the lives of people in socialist countries, support informal political organizations in these countries with funds, establish scholarships, and other activities, all of which have clear targets. The objects of U.S. help and funding are targeted, and those who can be shaken are preferred. 3. Consistency of strategic purpose. Although the containment strategy will change in form in terms of its operating organization, financial support, public opinion media, personnel training targets, and influence methods in different periods and locations, the strategic purpose of U.S. global interests first has not changed. Whether it was the Iranian coup in the 1950s, the Prague Spring in the 1960s, the Vietnam War in the 1970s, the Yellow Revolution in the Philippines in the 1980s, and the Eastern European upheavals and conflicts in the late 1980s and early 1990s, the disintegration of the Soviet Union, the series of revolutions in Central Asia in the 21st century, etc., are all ultimately for the strategic purpose of U.S. global interests first, and have in fact enhanced the hegemony of the United States. U.S. global interests first is the golden rule of the U.S. global strategy, which runs through the entirety of the U.S. hegemony. In the field of economy and trade, the law of the jungle based on the principle of maintaining a trade surplus is still the leading thinking of the United States in dealing with the Sino-US trade war today. In international politics, the United States vows to infiltrate Western democracy into every corner of the globe. In the anxious state of the epidemic in their own countries, Russia, Iran, Libya, Syria, Armenia, and Azerbaijan, including Afghanistan in 2021, have all left the imprint of the United States involvement. Culturally, American values are promoted under the guise of universal values and Western values are promoted under the pretext of plural values, in an attempt to establish the principle of prioritizing interests under the identity of values. 2. The stability of the elements of the U.S. containment strategy. 1. The stability of the operating organization. In the Western containment operations in the 1950s and 1960s, the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency, hereinafter referred to as the CIA, and Interpol played an important organizational role as operating agencies. Russian political commentator Ilya Belov said in his article How the Color Revolution Was Implemented that Philip Urin, who first worked in the Christian Freemasonry and later in the CIA, came to our attention for the first time in 1968 when the commander-in-chief of the university riots in Mexico, one of the most important features of which was the simultaneous student riots in New York, Bonn, Prague, and West Berlin. In 1991, American political commentator and former staff member of the British intelligence agency, Joan Colomow, mentioned in the book Committee of 300 which recorded the activities of the world's elite, Interpol with experience in coordinating activities and a professional intelligence network is not difficult. Build prestige around the world to orchestrate university student riots or remove sovereign leaders from power. Although strictly prohibited from interfering in the political, military, and clan activities of other countries and peoples, Interpol and the CIA began a joint effort to defend U.S. interests, to carry out a campaign against all continents. To this day, the CIA has served as the core command for the color revolutions as the operating agency. The main task of the CIA is to collect and analyze foreign governments, companies, terrorist organizations, individuals, and political, cultural, technological and other intelligence, coordinate the activities of other domestic intelligence agencies, and report these intelligence to various departments of the U.S. government for the U.S. The government took countermeasures. More importantly, the CIA is also responsible for a large number of military equipment and intelligence work. The organization, personnel, funding and activities of this agency are strictly confidential, and even Congress cannot intervene. Over the years, the CIA has provided organizational guarantees for the stable operation of the containment strategy in terms of funds, intelligence, armament technology, personnel, and management. 2. Stability of financial support. As a stable operating organization, the CIA continued to support a series of revolutions in West Asia, Central America, South Asia, Southeast Asia, North America, South America, and Central Africa in the form of funds from the 1950s to the 1970s, resulting in Iran, Guatemala, Thailand, regime changes in Dominica, Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, Indonesia, Chile, Congo, Hungary, and more. In 1971, Radio Liberty, which supported the containment strategy, included its budget in the budget of the U.S. Congress. In 1983, the non-governmental organization National Endowment for Democracy was established to reward nations and people who strive to fight for democracy. To this day, the democracy export and color revolutions promoted by Western forces rely on the funding of the National Endowment for Democracy. From the CIA to the U.S. Congress to the National Endowment for Democracy, the financial support of the United States has never stopped, and has always maintained the stability of financial support. In addition, there are some foundation organizations such as Support International Democracy Foundation, Freedom House, Open Society, Support Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor Corporation, Ford Fund, etc., which are preparing for the Color Revolution Funding Agency. Its funding projects include going to various places to investigate the conditions and timing of the revolution, summarizing and imparting the achievements of the revolution, conducting election training, etc. These institutions ensure the continuity of financial support to a greater extent. 3. The stability of public opinion propaganda. In order to build the image of the United States as a beacon of human rights and a defender of human rights, the operating system of the containment strategy has always attached great importance to public opinion propaganda. From the 1950s to the 1980s, they mainly used books, newspapers, radio stations, etc. to build public opinion and provide spiritual support for the so-called revolution, including newspapers, magazines, and pamphlets supporting opposition parties in various countries. As the main and most stable propaganda medium, radio once played an important role, especially in the 1970s and 1980s when the internet was not popularized. Compared with newspapers and books, radio became the most powerful propaganda with a larger audience means. Radio Liberty is under the jurisdiction of the International Radio Broadcasting Administration of the United States, and its operating funding background is the United States Congress. As we all know, Radio Liberty is completely supervised by the CIA. In 1976, Radio Liberty and Radio Free Europe merged, and their influence increased again. After the 1990s, the role of the Internet increased sharply, and the public opinion propaganda function of the network media began to play a vital role. Social media such as Facebook and Twitter were widely used to organize protests, communicate with each other, and contact the outside world. National leaders and government dignitaries are also generally good at using Twitter to express their political positions. Tunisia and Egypt were the first countries in the Arab world to experience regime change. These two countries also happen to have the highest proportion of the communication industry. Their revolution is a typical internet revolution. The upheaval in the Middle East in 2011 began with the Jasmine Revolution in Tunisia at the end of 2010, and the earliest trigger of the Jasmine Revolution was WikiLeaks, so it was called the Wiki Revolution. Today, movements such as the Facebook Revolution, Twitter Uprising, and Keyboard Revolution continue to occur around the world. 4. Stability of training objects. The specific implementers of the containment strategy cultivate democracy fighters all over the world, meet with them regularly, exchange, impart experience, discuss specific strategies, etc., and maintain the stability of the training targets for a long time. The training of democracy fighters mainly targets young college student leaders from various countries and regions, with the aim of making them the protagonists of the future revolution. Some countries are relatively poor as a whole, and the living conditions of the people are far worse than those of their neighbors, resulting in a psychological gap. Western forces took advantage of this to instigate dissatisfaction, promote Western values, advocate a market economy, and train young students and even small businessmen and business owners as the driving force for the revolution. Young college students are active in their thinking and are easily inspired by the slogans of freedom and democracy. The United States has seized this characteristic of young people, especially college students, and made this group a long-term key training target. While disseminating democratic values, they have also strengthened the training of specific methods, and the revolution planned from this is highly operable, especially the high-amount scholarship funding project, to cultivate pro-American key elements. Various religious groups have also gone deep into relevant countries, stepping up religious infiltration, and further preparing for the color revolution in terms of values and social psychology, using aid or technology guide. The development of political activities influence the values of the countries concerned, etc. The Tulip Revolution in Kyrgyzstan in 2005, the abnormal regime change in 2010, and the protests in Bishkek in 2020 were all pro-Western forces cultivated by the United States as the main force. 5. The stability of the advocate thinking. In 1946, George Kennan, known as the father of containment strategy, put forward the idea of political containment in his speech at the National Defense Academy of the United States. This idea particularly emphasized black propaganda, that is, through public opinion propaganda and information manipulation. Release designs specific information, realize the control of the audience's psychological emotions, and then affect their behavior to a certain extent, in order to seek asymmetrical strategic benefits. In 1947, Kennan, who was the U.S. ambassador to the Soviet Union at the time, put forward the specific concept of containment strategy, that is, to use all means other than military means to firmly and patiently prevent the expansion of socialism, and the purpose of peaceful evolution is clear exposed. In the 1970s, Gene Sharp, known as the spiritual godfather of the Color Revolution, was the designer and practitioner of nonviolent regime change or soft coup. In Color Revolution, Gene Sharp can be seen almost everywhere. In 1977, as the initiator of the expansion of soft power, Brzezinski more delicately designed a set of strategies for completely defeating socialism and communism ideologically. Brzezinski specifically proposed to grasp human rights. Advocating respect for human rights has a huge impact and far-reaching significance, and can accelerate the process of the decline and fall of communism. The book blatantly proposes to destroy and eliminate communist countries in the name of human rights and democracy. In 2020, the so-called Hong Kong Autonomy Act passed by the U.S. Congress in spite of China's strong opposition is nothing but a repeat of Brzezinski's old trick 30 years ago. 6. Stability of implementation. Although the revolution under the guidance of the containment strategy mainly uses peace and nonviolence as its propaganda method, vertically and in detail, its method unfolds along the path of force peace plus force. In the 1950s, CIA-funded regime change was largely barbaric. The Ajax coup in Iran in 1953, the Guatemala coup in 1954, the Thai military coup in 1957, the Dominican and Indonesian military coups in 1965, and the Chilean coup in 1972 all used force. This is a revolution. Initial features. The casualties caused by the above-mentioned so-called revolution aroused the anger of righteous people all over the world. They could not stand the pressure of political ethics in the perspective of global civilization. Therefore, the U.S. authorities had to change their strategic approach and shifted the containment strategy from force to containment strategy. Nonviolence. Especially after Kissinger took office as Secretary of State in the 1970s, containment began to adopt a peaceful approach. In fact, during the Reagan era, the February Revolution in the Philippines marked with yellow, the Kazakhstan incident marked with egg yolk, and the Jasmine Revolution in Tunisia basically adopted peaceful means. It can be seen that since the 1970s, the revolution has turned in the direction of nonviolence. However, it should be pointed out that the containment strategy does not completely eliminate the use of force in the process of implementing the nonviolent revolution. The Tulip Revolution in Kyrgyzstan in 2005, the scourge of the Color Revolution in Libya from 2011 to the present, and the Color Revolution in Ukraine in 2014. The use of force has intensified in recent years. Whether it is the method of force, the method of peace, or the method of peace plus force, the means of revolution all serve the fundamental purpose of containing socialism. It must be emphasized that behind any peaceful approach, there is armed force behind it. 3. The continuity of the implementation process of the U.S. containment strategy. 1. From Truman to Carter. The U.S. containment strategy presents continuity in time. No matter who is the president, there is consistency in the implementation of the containment strategy. Although the establishment of the containment strategy system began in the Carter period, the United States peace as a gimmick and propaganda method of containment strategy has begun since World War II, and its symbol is Kennan's proposal in 1947. Containment theory. As early as the end of Truman's tenure, the United States participated in planning the coup in Ajax, Iran in 1953. The democratically elected Mossadegh government was overthrown, and the nationalist movement in Iran suffered setbacks. Subsequently, Iran has returned to the authoritarian regime model. The United States played a crucial role in the 1953 coup, which was a matter of Iran's future. Without the active participation of the United States, the chances of the coup succeeding are slim to none. This coup was the prelude to the implementation of the containment strategy. In the ensuing Eisenhower period, the United States participated in planning the coup in Guatemala in 1954 and the military coup in Thailand in 1957. Kennedy died in 1963, and the revolution was temporarily put on hold. During the Johnson period, there were military coups in Indonesia in 1965, a coup in Dominica and the famous Prague Spring in 1968. During the Nixon and Ford periods, based on the need for an arms race with the Soviet Union, the United States adjusted its diplomatic strategy, and the scope of the revolution was reduced, but coups in Chile and Southeast Asian countries, Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, still occurred. During the Carter period, Brzezinski became a presidential advisor, and the containment strategy changed from peaceful evolution to color revolution. In short, whether it is Carter, Nixon, or Ford, none of the US presidents and their governments have relaxed the containment penetration of the socialist camp, and this penetration is still dominated by cultural and ideological penetration. 2. From Reagan to Bush Jr. The containment strategy with the color revolution as a specific plan was formally formed during Reagan's second term in 1985. At that time, as a supporting facility for the color revolution, the NGO National Endowment for Democracy also came into being. After Reagan's revolutionary strategy was clear and the plan was mature, the Reagan administration concentrated on planning the 1986 Philippine Yellow Revolution, February Revolution, Kazakhstan's Egg Yolk Revolution in 1987, Tunisia's Jasmine Revolution in 1989, and the Czechoslovakian Revolution in 1989. The Velvet Revolution, the Tbilisi Incident, and the Singers' Revolution in the Baltic states from 1989 to 1990 broke out one after another. If we say that the Reagan period was only the experimental stage of the color revolution, then the period of George Herbert Walker Bush, Sister Bush, was the stage of carrying out the color revolution with great fanfare. The point is obvious. Although it cannot be ruled out that the bulldozer revolution in Yugoslavia in 1990, the Black January riots in Azerbaijan, the upheavals in Eastern Europe in the late 1980s and early 1990s, and the disintegration of the Soviet Union were related to Reagan's policies, Bush Sr. supported these events, strategic measures, and applauded the disintegration of the Soviet Union. Clinton was the only U.S. president who did not take a stand for the color revolution. This may have something to do with the sharp conflicts between the Democratic Party and the Republican Party in the United States at that time. At that time, the United States focused its energy on handling internal affairs. But it is worth noting that when Clinton was in office, the U.S. NATO expansion strategy had a remarkable effect. Bush Jr., George Walker Bush, was the staunchest executor and defender of Bush Sr.'s policies. The color revolution was officially named during the Bush Jr. period, and the revolution measures were more coherent and closer. Georgia's Rose Revolution in 2003, Ukraine's Orange Revolution in 2004, Iraq's Purple Revolution in 2005, Kyrgyzstan's Tulip Revolution, Lithuania's Cedar Tree Revolution, and Belarus' Cornflower Revolution in 2006. Mexico's Cactus Revolution triggered by the election crisis, the Crocus Revolution in Myanmar in 2007, and the armed conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan in 2008, etc., all occurred during the Bush administration. No matter which so-called revolution, no matter whether it is successful or not, there is the care of the Bush administration behind it. 3. From Obama to Biden. The largest implementation of the color revolution was during the Obama period, and the reason why he himself won the Nobel Peace Prize was inseparable from this. Moldavia's Twitter Revolution in 2009, Iran's Green Revolution, Thailand's Red Shirt Revolution in 2010, riots in southern Kyrgyzstan, Tunisia's Second Jasmine Revolution in 2011, Egypt's Twitter Revolution, Snowflake Revolution in South Ossetia, anti-government demonstrations in Bahrain, demonstrations in Jordan, civil unrest in Yemen, riots and civil war in Libya, color revolution and civil war in Syria, Russian White Belt protests in 2011 to 2012, 2013, riots in 2015, Venezuelan election conflicts, pro-EU demonstrations in Ukraine in 2013 to 2014, the Umbrella Revolution in Hong Kong in 2014, the political crisis in Macedonia in 2015, the Maidan Revolution in Armenia, the Turkish coup in 2016, and the 2018 the Russian-Ukraine confrontation, etc. Color revolution filled the whole process of Obama's administration. Trump, who was a businessman, did not change the original position of the U.S. containment strategy, but moved the field of war to the field of trade. However, the Hong Kong riots in 2019 still reflect the usual thinking of the color revolution in the United States, but this time they will target China. At the beginning of 2021, the Democratic Party Biden came to power, and the implementers of the U.S. containment strategy carried out a power transfer. In January 2021, when street riots broke out in Russia, the United States tactics were exactly the same as before, but more inflammatory. When it comes to containment tactics, the Democrats are better. It can be seen that no matter which U.S. government it is, no matter how domestic and foreign policies change, the continuity of the color revolution in the implementation process has always been maintained. For the extensibility of the U.S. containment strategy implementation space. 1. 1950s to 1960s, occupation. The U.S. containment strategy is malleable in terms of implementation space. From the very beginning, the containment strategy has locked the global war situation. In the 1950s and 1960s, the U.S. containment strategy took the form of occupation in space, that is, the delineation of containment areas. In Asia, there are Iran, West Asia, Thailand, and Indonesia. South Asia, in America, Dominican Republic, North America, Guatemala, Central America. In Africa, there is Congo, Central Africa. In Europe, there are Czechoslovakia, Eastern Europe, etc. The U.S. containment strategy operation has occupied 4 continents except Antarctica, South America, and Oceania, laying the foundation for the implementation of the containment strategy around the world. 2. 1970s to 1980s, blockade. In the 1970s and 1980s, the United States containment strategy took the form of a blockade in space, that is, to blockade the original strategic objects on the basis of further reinforcement. In Asia, there are Philippines, Southeast Asia, Vietnam, Southeast Asia, Kazakhstan, Central Asia, China, East Asia. In America, Chile, South America. In Africa, Tunisia, North Africa, etc. The 5 continents except Antarctica and Oceania are all under strategic blockade, among which China has become the most poor target country except the Soviet Union. 3. 1990s, consolidation. In the early 1990s, the world socialist movement suffered major setbacks. The drastic changes in Eastern Europe and the disintegration of the Soviet Union became the major achievements of the containment strategy of the United States. The United States is worried that the system transformation of these countries and regions is not complete, so it focuses on consolidating achievements. For example, assisting the war in Chechnya in order to realize the division of Russia again, prompting Yugoslavia to continue to be divided on the basis of disintegration, alienating the republics that were good to the United States before the disintegration of the Soviet Union, making them more and more desperate on the basis of division. NATO continued to expand eastward, the ideological and military positions have been moved to the doorstep of Russia, and it is increasingly approaching China. And so on. The 1990s was a period of consolidation of the U.S. containment strategy on the basis of the original achievements. 4. Since the 21st century, strengthening. Since the 21st century, the containment activities of the United States have been carried out on a global scale. In Europe, there are Moldavia and Belarus, Eastern Europe, the Baltic states, Northern Europe, Yugoslavia, Southern Europe, Macedonia, Southeastern Europe. In Asia, there are Myanmar and Thailand, Southeast Asia, Kyrgyzstan, Central Asia, South Ossetia, Bahrain, Syria, Armenia, Turkey. West Asia. In South America, Venezuela, Mexico. South America. In Africa, Egypt, Libya, North Africa, etc. From south to north, from east to west, the containment strategy extends spatially to every corner of the world, and its influence shows a trend of continuous strengthening. B. Countermeasures and suggestions for preventing and resisting the U.S. containment strategy. First, build an anti-containment think tank. Establish anti-containment think tanks in scientific research institutions, military academies, and military research institutes, where conditions permit, or rely on the Ministry of National Security to set up specialized agencies with anti-containment as the main task, and track the Western countries headed by the United States. The actions and means of implementing the containment strategy of the forces. At the same time, it is advisable to consider opening up a special funding channel for the anti-containment action and include it in the financial budget to ensure the stability of financial support from beginning to end and from top to bottom. In the National Social Science Fund or certain secret-related military scientific research projects, set up bidding projects with the research theme of anti-containment, and widely accept scientific and operable countermeasures and suggestions. Second, strengthen anti-containment publicity and education. Use the internet platform to set up official websites, microblogs, public accounts, etc. with the theme of anti-containment to expose Western containment tactics, and provide the general public with a basis for identifying color revolutions and Twitter revolutions and methods of resistance. In the situation and policy courses offered by colleges and universities, set up the teaching content with the theme of anti-containment, or set the theory and practice of anti-containment as elective courses of ideological and political courses in colleges and universities, and the courses containing anti-containment content is set as a compulsory course for preparatory students studying abroad. The elective course Chinese History and Social Culture is generally set up in colleges and universities across the country for current students and foreign students to take. The role of this course in cultural cognition has been proved by practice. Third, specialize the anti-containment operation. Within the ideological propaganda system, it is advisable to consider placing professional and full-time personnel in charge of anti-containment operations, and pay attention to the continuity of dominant thinking and practice. Fourth, explore one-stop solutions. In terms of defense methods, non-force solutions should be used in a targeted manner, but it is advisable to prepare for force. In view of the relevance of various elements in the implementation process of the Western containment strategy, it is appropriate to explore the one-stop solution of extracting the ladder from the house in the future, and carry out a devastating blow to a certain centralized containment action of the West against China, to prevent future troubles. Fifth, make anti-containment a long-term national strategy. United Socialist countries are the communist parties of the world, or use the Belt and Road Initiative as a medium to unite with European countries such as Russia, Belarus, Serbia, Hungary, etc. to carry out anti-containment with their respective geographical locations as the target, and deconstruct the Western containment strategy in space global layout. It is advisable to elevate anti-containment to the height of the country's long-term strategy, so as to break the consistency of the Western containment strategy. After all, containment has always been their century project of well-intentioned,